Good morning and thank you for joining this webinar, the evolution and regulation of cleaning chemicals. In a few minutes, I'll introduce our speaker, Peter Thistlethwaite, but first I'll introduce myself and the CHSA. I'm Lorca Mekatarian, the chair of the CHSA. We're run by our members for our members, and we represent about 200 manufacturers and distributors of cleaning and hygiene products. Our membership range from global multinationals to small independent businesses. Setting and maintaining standards is in our DNA. It's what we are known for in the industry and why members join. We set up our first accreditation scheme in 1997. We now have schemes for the manufacturers of paper, plastic, cleaning chemicals, and for distributors of cleaning and hygiene products. Independent inspection guarantees the integrity of our accreditation schemes. The auditor, an experienced quality assurance professional, visits every member to ensure compliance. He checks the labels to ensure they accurately reflect the content of the box and that they contain the required information so the product can be traced to the manufacturer. For the soft tissue accreditation scheme, he also checks the dimensions and the count of a representative sample of the product. For the plastic sack scheme, he uses the British Standard drop test to check the sacks are fit for purpose and that they hold the weight on the label. For the cotton mop accreditation scheme, he checks the weight, absorbency, and where relevant, the cotton content. For the scheme for cleaning chemicals, he checks the product volume and other required information is as specified on the label and fully supported by relevant test data. In addition, he checks the containers and the plastic bottles holding the chemical products are recyclable and clearly marked with the relevant recycling symbol. As well as being audited regularly, every CHS member has signed our rigorous code of practice. In 2022, we amended it to incorporate the Competition and Markets Authority Green Claims Code. The Green Claims Code requires companies to be truthful and accurate. Businesses must live up to the claims they make about their products, services, brands, and activities. Be clear and unambiguous. The meaning that a consumer is likely to take from products' messaging and credentials of the product should match. Not omit or hide important information. Claims must not prevent someone from making an informed choice because of the information they leave out. Only make fair and meaningful comparisons. Any products compared should meet the same needs or be intended for the same purpose. Consider the full life cycle of the product when making claims. Business must consider the total impact of a product or service. Claims can be misleading where they don't reflect the overall impact or where they focus on one aspect but not on another. Be substantiated. Business should be able to back up claims with robust, credible, up-to-date evidence. At the heart of our code is a commitment made by every member to maintain a high standard of conduct in its business. The combination of code of practice and accreditation scheme membership means every member trades ethically and sustainably, provides a quality fit-for-purpose product, and makes sure what's on the box is what's in the box. Today's webinar is about the evolution and regulation of cleaning brands. We launched a campaign called Regulations Matters earlier this year. Our purpose was to spread the word about the importance of regulation when buying cleaning chemicals. All sorts of claims about the environmental sustainability and efficacy of cleaning chemicals have been made today. This is a trend that began in the pandemic when regulations were put to one side. But UK government, European Union and industry standard regulations are essential if buyers are to be certain product claims are legitimate and proven. They guarantee safety, they underpin transparency and ensure consistency. They support buyers' informed decision-making by providing a framework for comparison. So buyer really knows if they're getting the product solution they need. Also, they provide accountability, giving buyers a route to recourse if needed. In short, they underwrite an ethical approach. To provide the context and information buyers need to make informed decisions, we've teamed up with Peter Thistlethwaite to produce a white paper titled The Evolution and Regulation of Cleaning Chemicals, which is available on our website. He's going to present that paper today. A little bit of background about Peter. Peter's the technical manager for cosmetics and biocides at MSL Solution Providers. He's a degree in microbiology and has worked in the water industry and cleaning and hygiene sector before joining MSL. MSL solution providers offer an integrated regulatory and laboratory testing service. Its in-house accredited microbiology and virology lab provide a comprehensive range of standard tests, including efficacy testing against bacteria, fungi, spores, viruses, and microbacteria, Legionella, and algae. It also offers a tailored solution for specific testing needs to support clients' individual requirements. Its expertise include in disinfectant testing, clean room validation, and claim support for the biocidal product regulations. And now I'd love to hand over to Peter. So I shall stop sharing and let Peter bring up his.
Okay.
Well, thank you for that introduction, Lorcan. I can see we've already got one attendee with the hand up. Obviously, mics and cameras are blocked for attendees. If you do have questions, just please pose them in the chat so then we can address them at the end of the talk. So thank you for that introduction again. Speak more highly of myself than I do. The evolution and regulation of chemical disinfectants is what I'll be discussing. So I'm going to go from the historical creation of disinfectants through to how regulations stand today and where they will be changing in the future. Go to the next slide. So as Lorcan said, I have 11 years working in the professional use market. So I started at a manufacturer where I worked for 5 years in the janitorial sector, carrying out testing for that company. And now I work for MSL, where I've been for a further nearly 6 years, acting as an independent test laboratory. Part of my role for this past 11 years is representing the industry at BSI, which is the UK overarching group for biocides. And then I represent the UK on behalf of BSI at the European writing groups under SEN. So I've written methods for cleaning products in the medical area, veterinary area, and janitorial area, and sit in several different technical task groups for things like UV devices, fogging devices, things like that. So I'm now going to talk about where we've come from as an industry and where biocides originate from. If we go to the next slide. It's existed as a technology for thousands of years. There's evidence that Egyptians used disinfectants for cleaning and for the mummification and preservation of bodies. Hippocrates talked about the use of vinegar and sulfur to sterilize vessels and containers, and the boiling of water to make it cleaner for longer. Moving all the way to the 1860s, we had the development of germ theory, and then the introduction of carbolic acid to surgical theatres, reducing post-surgery deaths dramatically, but with no understanding of really why. Robert Koch introduced the first, what we would call a disinfectant test method. He developed a method that he used on 14 different chemicals that were used for cleaning at the time, and proved that you could compare them by carrying out the same method. Riddell and Walker then introduced neutralization to that method and giving it a defined end time point, which is now a standard part of the methods that are all made today. In 1989, the UK became part of the first technical committee for disinfectants through SEN. So I'm going to briefly speak on where that came from in the next slide. We have Robert Koch's method in the 1880s, Geppert's expansion on that method in 1989, which provided a more rigorous standardization. And these led to the first standardized methods, evaluating the effectiveness of disinfectants and laying a foundation for what is modern disinfectant testing. All of the methods that came afterwards build on the work of these two men, and the work that was carried out through the late 1800s. Post-World War II, more and more chemical technologies came to fruition and entered the market using their own individual claims. And countries started to react by developing methods in their own way. So on the next slide. We have an introduction of a new problem. Not from this lack of understanding on how disinfectants work, but on a lack of harmonization on how to test a disinfectant. Each country became responsible for its own way of authenticating the biocide for what it could do. In the UK, we had the introduction of what's called the Kelsey-Sykes method. This was the standard for about 30 years. In the US, we had the use dilution method. It used carriers and surfaces rather than a suspension test. Holland had the quantitative 555 method, which became the groundwork for the first developed methods from SEN. And then the German Society of Hygiene and Microbiology was publishing multiple methods, both surface and suspension, but also for things like viruses. But none of these methods matched any of the others, which led to the new issue, not of this understanding. We all, as nations, understood that a disinfectant needed to be tested, but how to do it became the problem with harmonization. So the next slide. Why was this an issue? You couldn't clearly compare one disinfectant to another if it came from a different market. If I passed the Kelsey-Sykes method in the UK, I could not compare that to the 555 method in Holland. And this led to each and every country that you wanted to sell your product in, you had to do more and more test methods for the same purpose. If I wanted to kill bacteria in the UK, I would have, and then sell into France and Germany, I'd have to meet those countries' test methods. But because they were so distinctly different with their own criteria, you could potentially pass in one nation and fail in another, which meant you couldn't sell there. And it also led to a stagnation of scientific effort. With this division of effort, there was no onerous put on developing new methods. Why waste the cost and incentive if you have something that works for your country as it is? There's no point in introducing something just so other countries can enter your market. So it all led to trying to find direction as an industry. In the 1970s, a group of European nations, which included Austria, Belgium, West Germany at the time, the Netherlands, Sweden, Switzerland, and the UK, formed the first group on the evaluation of disinfectants. They worked together for 20 years before the collapse of the USSR, and we had the formation of SEN TC216, the chemical disinfectants and antiseptics group. The SEN committee was tasked with developing, publishing, and maintaining methods to prove the efficacy of disinfectant. TC216 was split into 3 distinct areas of use. First was WG1, which is the medical area, tasked with developing all methods for use in hospital areas and any type of treatment situation. WG2 for veterinary area, for anything to do with animal husbandry, vets and treatment for animals. And then WG3 covered multiple areas of use, making the bulk of the market of disinfectants, the domestic, janitorial, industrial, and pharmaceutical area of use. These 3 groups have published all of the EN methods that are now used today when forming a BPR dossier and putting efficacy on your product's label. But now we have harmonization of method. There was no regulation on how to apply that harmonized method. We can all test the products the same now. We have published methods within Europe, but regulations had to be brought in to assure several things. The BPR defines those things as ensuring that posing as far as possible minimal risk to people, animals, and the environment, which is a huge part of why the BPR was brought in. You had to ensure that your product, when going into wastewater or used in the environment, wasn't detrimental to animals and the environment that it was going into, and that it posed as little risk to people who were using the products. And then it was also to improve the free movement of biocidal products within the union. If you set out one set of rules for the whole of the union, plus any states that follow in the same path, then you can, in theory, access all parts of the union and open up the market to everyone equally. Why was it required? So before the introduction of BPR, it allowed any active material to be used without much consideration for the environment or where it came from. Active substance suppliers could be from anywhere, and they didn't have any data requirement to sell their active into the market. And then test methods existed, but there was no minimum requirements for those test methods. If you wanted to sell a bactericidal product, you could do just one test method and then sell it all singing, all dancing on the label. It kills all bacteria. And then competent authorities, so the individual nations, could in theory set their own demands of products based on the test methods available. And there'd be no way of monitoring what products were on the market or a way of reviewing the data that they were providing. So here's a brief overview. There are parts of this that are missing, but this is just to give the wider scope. Regulation started with the BPD in 1998, setting out a way of harmonizing authorization and the marketing of biocidal products in the EU. This changed in 2013 to the BPR. This further tried to streamline that authorization process, and it's centralized the evaluation of active substances. So from BPR, we got the BPC, which is the Biocidal Products Committee, and they release opinions. I'll speak more on them in a second. They brought in Article 95. This is a list of active suppliers and product type combinations that can be used in biocidal products. All of these regulations currently, with the situation of the UK being separate to the EU, are at the moment not diverged from each other. The BPR in Europe is the same as the GB BPR, and the Article 95 in Europe is the same as GB Article 95. The European Chemical Agency became the task force to enforce it, and now with the separation of the UK, the HSE is responsible for the enforcement in the UK. And then you have member state competent authorities beyond the HSE. Every country has their own competent authority. They will be reviewing dossiers and biocides on their individual markets and with the intention of enforcement.
Peter, sorry, can I interrupt? Which slide
Absolutely.
do you want to be? Which slide do you want to be on?
I'm on number 11.
Okay, thank you. Carry on.
And then number 12.
Okay. That's grand.
Perfect. So how does it work in principle with these regulations to get into the market? For most of the people in this call, this is probably already knowledge that you've been working with as a company. But for people who sell as suppliers to end users, this may be completely new to you. So the BPR is the overarching law that covers the whole of the EU and in theory the UK now as well, aiming to improve the safety of chemicals used within those markets whilst protecting the environment and human and animal health. From that, we have ECHA who enforce it, and ECHA have a group called the BPC, the Biocidal Products Committee, who meet 4 times a year to publish opinions and a series of other factors affecting different elements of biocides. So this is the applications for approval for new actives, the review of active substances for substitution. So what that means is if an active becomes deemed too unsafe or scientific data becomes produced that lends to the fact that a product may be unsafe for use. An example of which would be ethanol is currently under review by the BPC as a carcinogen, of which they may publish an opinion that all ethanol products become carcinogens. From that, you have an approval of an active substance. They publish what's called an opinion on an active substance. This starts a ticking clock where you have 2 years, there or thereabouts, to provide a dossier to your competent authority for approval to stay on the market. ECHA lays out the minimum requirements that a product must meet for that BPR dossier. So you have analytical testing, physical chemistry testing, human health and environmental evaluation, and then specific data requirements, which would be things like claim support, efficacy testing. Based off that, then you would have published and recognized methods in most cases that you can use to substantiate and build your dossier. And then it is submitted to a competent authority for review, where this is now complicated by the UK status. And this is the biggest issue post leaving the EU, is the mutual recognition of products across markets. Where we may publish a dossier in the UK, the European Union does not have access to that dossier. So you have to resubmit the same dossier within an EU state. Next slide, please. There are several exemptions to these rules. Not everything covers everything, and regulation tends to be slower than the market itself. A lot of active substances do not have opinions yet published, so they are not subject to a BPR dossier. It doesn't exempt a product from the requirements of Article 95. You still need to use an active substance supplier that is a registered and approved supplier for any active substance. And it doesn't exempt you from efficacy guidance requirements, but you do not yet have to have submitted a BPR dossier to a competent authority if there's no opinion yet published. This is made multiplied really by the multiple substance products. So if you contain 2 or more active substances in combination, you're not subject to a dossier until the last active substance goes through the approval process. You do have to prove that all of the active substances that you have in your product serve a purpose. And you may be questions upon that, but you don't have to submit that dossier until you've reached the 2-year deadline of the last active substance through. And then there's new technologies that aren't yet covered. Every year, new actives enter the market. This may be from a well-known provider of chemistries, or it may be from a more independent source. They won't be covered by the BPR because there will be no opinion upon them, but you will, as an active substance supplier, have to be registered on Article 95, or no one can use it in a biocide within the EU. That is a complicated process, but is a lot less complicated than going through the BPR itself and publishing those opinions. So you'd expect that to take many years to actually get to a point where it would go through an opinion process. Next slide. And there are other gaps within the current guidance. The BPR doesn't cover, it only covers chemistry, it doesn't cover energy. So UV disinfection, which is really common within the NHS and within other medical bodies across Europe, is not covered at all by the BPR. There are test methods now, since 2022, to prove how a UV device disinfects, how well it disinfects compared to other machines, but it is not yet covered by an overarching rule like the BPR. The disinfection of air is not covered. So you will commonly see fogging devices that claim to disinfect surfaces, but you may also come across devices that claim to disinfect the air that you breathe. There is no test methods, there is no guidance, and there is no coverage for that in the BPR. Commonly, these things release low levels of ozone or ionized have ionizing bulbs or other contraptions within them, but they're not covered by a framework currently. Then you have sort of new and emerging technologies. This may be far UVC, plasma, or even treated articles, sort of nanomaterials. These aren't currently adequately addressed in regulation or test methods. And then there's drinking water disinfection. This is a specific product type. If a product is used for the disinfection of drinking water, that has coverage under the BPR and has guidance and dossier approval notices. However, there is no suitable way of testing the product works for drinking water application in test methods. So it's a gap, not in necessarily guidance, but in the application of that guidance. And the rapid pace of technology development is leaving more and more of these gaps every year that both SEN, ECHA, and the EU regulators are all trying to catch up on. And this leaves gaps for things like fraud. In the next page. So the future holds sort of increased regulatory complexity as the UK further separates from the EU. I will speak on it a little bit more, but the UK is already making plans to separate itself further from the BPR. And where the EU now makes changes to its guidance, the UK doesn't necessarily have to hold to those changes in guidance. There's going to be a rise in compliance costs, both of the fact that now there will be multiple notifications required between UK BPR and EU BPR, but also in the fact that every year more test methods are published, which leads to more minimum required testing for each product on the market. There's an emergence of eco-friendly alternatives with the push for against the climate crisis, which is leading to overextended claims at a minimum, fraudulent claims at worst, going on to labels across the whole of the European Union. And then there's the opportunity for fraudulent products to enter the market in these gaps that exist within regulation. Slide. So what do you look out for with fraud? Regulatory framework leaves enough room to take advantage of any law. It is slow to respond to rapid development of technologies in the space. And as an end user or supplier in the market, it's crucial that you understand and ensure the biocides you purchase meet the requirements of these regulations. To not do so can lead to you having products taken away from you by a competent authority and removed from your shelves so you can't sell them after you've already made the purchase. For manufacturers, it can lead to litigation and lawsuit. And overall, for everyone, it can lead to a lack of brand integrity or industry integrity when there is too much fraud. No one can trust an industry. So next slide. So what to look out for? I've put here a few of the key ones that we see as a lab every year. And if it sounds too good to be true, it probably is. So long-term effect is a key one that we see every year, more and more product making. There are test methods that you can do within a lab that show a product remains active on a surface for up to 24 hours, and that is in a contact surface situation. So it has abrasion cycles within the test method. But beyond 24 hours, there is no method that can support your claims. So if you see a product claiming 30-day protection, 180 or even 365 are things I have seen, there is no application in a lab that can prove that claim. So if you see those claims, you should be questioning them immediately. Kills all known pathogens is a common one we see on the labels as well. Specific organism claims are not allowed in the BPR. It becomes a medical device if you say that you kill a specific organism on the label. This could be saying it kills COVID-19, but it could be that you say that it kills E. coli 0157. Writing that specifically on the label isn't allowed under current guidance, but you can test them in a lab. And being effective against one organism does not necessarily equate to effect against all organisms. You'll find that lab methods use organisms that are the most chemically resistant. They're developed in a way that produces the most broad spectrum result, but it's not always going to be the case. There will always be organisms that extend beyond that. And you would have to prove against all the different test methods. So if you've done bacteria testing, you can't claim sporicidal without doing sporicidal test methods. We see all natural claims more and more every year. These eco-friendly claims doesn't necessarily mean it's safe. They're no safer than a normal disinfectant. If its aim is to kill bacteria, it will more than likely be harmful to the person using it if they were to ingest it or use it every day chronically. And these claims, like all natural, green, eco-friendly, environmentally friendly, they have no legal definition, and there is no guidance on what you need to have as a product to constitute those claims. If it has passed X test method, it will also work for this. Is another one we see. So if it's killed envelope viruses, it's fine, it will deal with norovirus, I'm sure. That's not true. So if you have not done the correct method to prove a claim, then you have no way of supporting those new claims on the market. You need to test for everything that you want to make a claim against on the market. Calling something cutting edge technology is not necessarily misleading, but it does lead to pitfalls. If it's truly new, is that active on Article 95? If it's not, then it will be withdrawn from the market when it's caught. It may also not have any supporting data for human health, which is a key part of Article 95. You're proving that what you're providing to the market is the same every time and that it's safe to be provided to the market. And it may have multiple chemistries, so it doesn't need BPR for ages, is something I see a lot of manufacturers doing. This can, in some cases, be a good way of delaying your BPR process, but only if you can prove that every active that you're introducing to your chemistry has a purpose. So you can't just add an active substance and say, well, now I'm not subject until its deadline. What's that active substance doing in your chemistry? Is it adding more stability like silver does in hydrogen peroxide? Or does it affect fungal claims, reducing the dilution requirements? Does it make the product act on a quicker time frame, reducing contact times? As long as you have a justification, that's fine. But if you're adding something just for the avoidance of regulation, that can lead to complications further down the road. Next slide, please. So the consequences are ranging, and I've got a few examples for each one of these that you can see on screen. So loss of brand integrity. I'm going to talk about a company that during COVID produced a 30-day claim product. It was sold worldwide, and it was in all national papers when it was found to not be effective for 30 days in the areas of use. They went from a share price of $2 a share to now currently their share price is $0.019 a share. They've lost all integrity as a brand now because they had multiple lawsuits in multiple countries because a claim could not be supported in the real world use. Fines and lawsuits. We've got several lawsuits ongoing currently. One was just dismissed, but not to say that there were aspects of that case that were true. Claims that you make on your label, if found to be untrue, do open you up to litigation. The litigation can go all the way from fining you substantial sums of money, all the way to imprisonment if it's found that your product is completely outside of its use. And a case for that with imprisonment was a company based out of Birmingham that were found to be selling a hand sanitizer that was only 30% alcohol. It's a clear case of fraud, but they were absolutely selling this product as it kills 99% of COVID. And then now they face 3 years in prison, and they've been fined over £250,000 for their against their profits that they made from selling a false product. Also, once you've been caught once, even if it is found to be an untrue statement or a factual statement, but has led to scrutiny from regulators, you will face further scrutiny down the line. So making sure that you are compliant all the way through the process, and even before you have got a dossier in, will lead you to have a much easier time with regulators. We have dealt with brands that have had complaints made against their claims on their label. They had done the testing, but for the time that they were under investigation by trading standards, they had to cease trading during that period of time. So it removes them from the market. They had to take their products from the shelves because they were under investigation. And when the case was dismissed, then they could go back to trading. But that process is slow. If you're found to be in breach, you can just have all your products removed from market and you won't be able to access the market again. Whether that is selling an active that's not on Article 95, or whether it's making claims that aren't supported on the label, or you've got your labeling wrong and it has properties that aren't put on there, like dangerous to the environment or something that can cause personal injury if PPE isn't used. There is a case currently with a fogging device that was used in UK hospitals. 2 people were quite severely injured because they weren't weren't instructed by the manufacturer on how to use that product properly. And that led to a lawsuit that paid out in the 5-figure sums. And then it has led to that product being removed for a period of time from the market. And now they face extreme scrutiny from the regulators, where they're being asked to provide data for every use instruction. So what can you do to try and protect yourself from these claims, from these issues? The best thing you can do is just ask questions. If someone makes a claim on a label that sounds too good to be true, double check it. Either get the company to provide you with test data or ask an expert. There are companies like ourselves, but there are many other labs. There are physical chemistry labs, there are regulatory compliance providers, consultants that you can seek advice from. Provide them a label, provide them the product and say, or test data if it's provided, and ask, does this stand up to scrutiny? You may find that someone makes a 30-day claim, provides you with a test certificate, but what does that test certificate mean? You're not expected to be an expert, but you are expected to check these claims on the label. As much as possible, stay up to date. When it comes to the BPR and the separation from the UK from the EU, there will be more and more of these changes that happen throughout the next few years. Try and stay up to date as much as possible. ECHA publishes what's called a TAB document a couple of times a year. These technical updates add further requirements or clarity to certain parts of testing. This could be proving that an active substance is not active in your product, so therefore it's not subject to BPR. Or it could be updates to test methods when they get published. The best way to do that is just seek the advice through ECHA or through the CHSA. And find trusted partners. It's good having labs that you can rely on. It's good having consultants that you can rely on and trade bodies that you can ask advice from. If you don't know what you're looking at, ask someone who has the expertise to check something for you. Though that added confidence will get you a better deal from your suppliers. It will stop you from falling into issues when you put products on the market, and ensure that your labeling is accurate and correct, and you'll avoid having to cease trading, having to face fines, have the scrutiny, and have your name in potentially in news articles in a bad light that ruins a company's standing in the market. I haven't put a slide that says any questions, but if there are questions, do please feel to post them in the chat, and we'll do our best to address all of them. I've seen a few come through whilst I've been speaking. So thank you all for your time, and now we'll start addressing some questions, if that's all right.
Thanks, Peter. You're on mute, Kathy.
Thank you. Thought I'd done that. We've had some questions submitted in advance as well. Should we pick up the ones that have come through the chat first, because they look relatively straightforward? So one is, how are major well-known brands able to make claims such as eliminates 99.99% of germs?
So this is a factor of doing the test methods correctly. So the 99.99% is what we call a 4-log reduction. You'll see log reduction factors in test methods ranging from 3-log to 5-log, depending on its area of use and what the method is. If you've passed the testing for bacteria and yeast, which is the minimum requirement to claim a bactericidal product, you can use the term germs on the label. Both of those methods require a minimum of a 4-log reduction or 5-log reduction for testing that allows you to say 99.99%, because that's what the log factor is. So you can use the term germs if you've done bacteria and yeast testing. Those are 2 separate methods. You can use 99.99% if you've achieved a 4-log reduction in those test methods. You have to have passed both.
Okay, thank you. The other is about the implementation date for the UK BPR.
So technically the UK BPR is in place now. It is separate to the EU BPR, but we have not diverged currently from EU guidance. That is looking to change. However, there are no dates. So the UK is considering what's called COPRA, which is more of a pesticide regulation, but they're looking to apply that to biocides. It will allow for different types of access to the market. In the meantime, there may be that the EU produces changes to the guidance in ECHA that the HSE does not implement here. So it's making sure you stay up to date on both what the HSE are putting out and what the European Chemical Agency is putting out. But we have no clear guidance on when changes will be coming for UK BPR. I'm just aware that there are plans to try and diverge in the near future.
Thank you. Then the next question, I'll go on to the ones that we've had submitted in advance then. So this is from Delia Cannings. We often hear the argument cleaning agents should be rinsed away after cleaning, therefore clean then rinse is the process. In reality, and in my experience, rinsing is not a routine activity when cleaning is carried out. If a cleaning product purports to be rinse-free, how does this work scientifically, or is it just another unsubstantiated claim?
So yeah, in practice, products are not rinsed away. You'll see it in any restaurant up and down the country where someone comes and sprays the table, wipes it down, but it's not rinsed afterwards with a wet cloth. That is technically a misuse of a product if it says the product must be rinsed. That's not necessarily on the manufacturer to enforce. But rinse-free products, there are chemistries that do break down into non-active substances. So you'll see commonly in the medical area, you might have a peracetic acid product which just breaks down into acetic acid and water, leaving none of the active substance behind. In some chemistries like quartz salts, they are persistent chemicals, so they will bind to surfaces and leave behind residues. Sometimes that is the intention of the product. So this is where you'll get things like 24-hour protection claims. Sometimes that it bears no relevance on whether or not it's rinsed away or not. It poses no risk to the person using the product. You just have to be aware of whether or not your active substance is a sensitizer. If you're leaving an active material on a surface that can cause sensitivities, then you have to be aware that that can be something that can come back to you as a manufacturer or a supplier. And always train the people that you're selling the product to. If it's a facilities management team or a company using the product, ensure that they're made aware of why they're doing something, and they'll more than likely do it.
Thank you. This one might be more for Nikki and Lorcan. Are the CHSA having conversations or lobbying central government in respect of the false statements from some suppliers, particularly in relation to greenwashing, in order for any false statements to be made potentially illegal? So that's really...
Yeah, there have been cases of green claims being made on products that have then led to scrutiny by trading standards. There isn't a form at the moment, as far as I'm aware, of harmonisation. Lorcan may have more in it than I do. But...
Again, it's an evolving area. Regulation comes out, but enforcement is very far behind and slow behind it. Until some enforcement action is taking place and some big brands are in the press, it doesn't filter down and people don't follow the regulations. So we as an association, or certainly as a sector, are very on the front foot on this point about greenwashing, and we make it mandatory for our members to certainly follow the code of conduct and the CMA's guidance. And it is, again, it's a feature and it's an agenda item that we have on our agenda to move forward with. If you want to add anything there, Nikki, please jump in.
Yeah, just against all our schemes, our accredited schemes, we do request, and all our members, new and pre-existing, must sign up to our code of conduct, but also our ethical marketing commitment we will be reinforcing at our forthcoming AGMs. And again, it's just ensuring that any marketing narrative is supported, as Peter has said, any biocidal efficacy claims must be supported with accurate and official test reports.
Thank you. This next question is from Keith Baker, who's been in the industry in one role or form or another since 1976, and indeed was part of the CHSA as well. And he's saying, throughout all of that time, the word sustainability has surfaced on many occasions, yet without definition acceptable to all parties. Is it possible to have a clear definition which our industry can support and promote as one?
So currently, no. I do believe there is a space for industry to start defining these terms, whether it's the CHSA, or whether it's other trade groups come together to form an opinion on what these claims should mean and how you substantiate them as a manufacturer. But currently, that hasn't yet been done or has not been presented to anyone in a position of authority to publish a regulation on it. I believe there is appetite in both government and in EU government to define these claims, because they are seeing it more and more themselves, and trading standards are tackling brands that are overstepping what those claims could be termed as a definition. So it may be something that the CHSA comes to an opinion on with the members, or it may be that other trade groups come together with the CHSA to try and publish something together. But this is all part of taking part in your trade groups to put these opinions out, is why it's really important that we work on developing towards these to substantiate the things that people are saying on the market.
Okay. The next question is, some products are promoted as replacing 95% of your cleaning products with one product. This seems rather an outlandish claim. This one's come from Nicholas Parish. Do we have any comments on that?
Is a bit of an outlandish claim. You do see products that have more extensive test regimes, but to replace all your products for every purpose is usually quite difficult. So if you have an issue in a care home with sporicidal issues, so C. diff is quite common, that is something that a lot of products will not have in testing. So it's making sure that you've got a product that meets the requirements of your issues in your sector. Domestic area use tends to have a lower requirement because people tend to keep their homes quite clean. So bacteria, yeast, maybe black mold, maybe envelope viruses for if someone's got cold and flu. You could not replace a product in a healthcare sector with something for the domestic area setting compared to a healthcare setting. It is possible to replace everything with one product. It's just making sure that it actually has all the testing required for the market it's being used in.
Okay. The next question is from Neil Emery. A number of companies now major on enzyme or bacterium-based products, and there appears to be no independent regulatory body that manages what they include as contents or claims made, yet they all state the green card. Clever marketing is driving the growth of these lines without any real science or substance to support it. Thoughts? ?
I have seen those products myself. So what they tend to be based around is spore suspensions, but they tend to be more deodorizing claims rather than antibacterial claims. You do see them every now and again with an antibacterial claim, but what they tend to have is something like quats in combination with these enzymes or spores. And there isn't any way of lab testing whether or not those spores have an effect on things like odor. There are trials you can do, but you'd have to work with a lab to develop something that's robust enough, and you still possibly will end up under scrutiny. As for the green claims, that is dependent on what is in the product. If it is just spores or an enzyme, then it's hard to say whether or not that is green as a product, because it's still quite an intensive process to culture those organisms and culture that enzyme, or whether or not it's got chemistry on the back of it, then that will be, are those chemistries green? Because the production of quats is a byproduct of other industrial manufacturing that more than likely will exempt you from being calling yourself green, but it's what's in that product as an active substance.
Okay. Next question. If you know there is a product on the market which is being marketed as tested to EN 1276, but actually has no certification, what do you do to challenge this? That comes from Nicholas Parish again.
This industry has been kind of left to self-regulate. Someone can go technically pull your products off a shelf from trading standards or from the HSE. Likelihood of it happening is slim. If you know of a product that is making a fraudulent claim on the market, report it directly to the trading standards. It's the only way that we can get fraud reliably taken off the market. But it does lead to, you have to report your competitors and the other people in your market.
Okay. Thank you. From the chat, technically, what is the difference between a sanitizer and a disinfectant?
So the definitions for this is grey. A sanitizer versus a disinfectant really could be defined as no different from each other. It's just how you want to phrase your product and what works better for your market. You'll find more often than not, products in the medical area call themselves sanitizers. Products in the domestic area call themselves disinfectants. In a sense of something like in a lab setting, to sanitize something is to make completely sterile. To disinfect is just to reduce the amount of organisms on a surface with the intention of removing as much as you can. This would be something that autoclaving versus chemical disinfection, but in an actual label by label problem, there's no real difference on the market, sadly.
Okay, thank you. This one's from Vicky Morris. Do you think regulations that govern chemicals should also cover biologicals and enzyme technology? And how far away from it are we?
I think if the product is making a claim of that could be classed as a biocidal claim, so the BPR defines that as essentially removing, reducing, controlling, or destroying microorganisms. If you make that claim, you're a biocide, whether or not you use an enzyme or a biological agent to do so. So it is technically covered by BPR, but this is one of those gaps in the market that is where there is no clear guidance on it and what is really an active substance in that product. They will have to prove that it's that enzyme or that biological agent making that disinfectant, and not a chemistry behind it, because then they're just subject to BPR for whatever the chemistry is.
Okay, thank you. We've got a couple more on the chat, which are about use really. So is it best practice to clean and disinfect in one step or to clean and then disinfect? Is that something?
This all comes down to the testing. So in every test method, you have what's called a clean condition and a dirty condition. Dirty conditions, if you can pass a test on dirty conditions, you technically can clean and disinfect in one step. If you pass in clean conditions, it's clean, then disinfect. They term it in the methods as visibly clean. So you're not disinfecting twice, you're rinsing or using a soaping agent or something beforehand. It's what's best practice for your product. If you are unsure if a product claims to be a cleaner and disinfectant, ensure that it has testing that shows that it passed dirty conditions testing. That's really key, especially in the medical area where those claims are really important, because the dirty conditions for medical test methods include things like bodily fluids. So that would be if someone has bled or has open wounds in a bed or in a hallway. Cleaning that is substantially different to cleaning something that has had that rinsed away beforehand. And a product may not work if it's in dirty conditions. A key one would be, for example, bleach. It does not work if there is organic matter present. So you must clean before using bleach because it breaks down in the contact with organic matter. So that can be as little as soil on the floor can break down bleach and it will render it useless. So it's down to what testing's been done, what chemistry is being used.
Okay. Are disinfection wipes viewed as acceptable for routine cleaning and disinfecting? They're widely overused across the NHS and often by clinical staff not trained in cleaning processes. However, they're also used by cleaning teams due to the easy accessibility. That's another one from Delia.
It's really what is your intention of routine cleaning? If your routine cleaning is to ensure that you're disinfecting every surface every half an hour or every 45 minutes because it's a hospital area that you might have someone who's immunocompromised, then yeah, you can use your disinfectant wipes for that purpose. Are there probably better alternatives for actually cleaning away a dirty floor, or someone's come in to a hospital and they've come from a work site and they've got brick dust everywhere or something like that off their clothing? That's probably not required for a disinfectant. You're better using something for the purpose of cleaning. They are, in my opinion, overused, as you say, within the medical area, more down to that ease of use, and they tend to be quite large pack sizes, so we tend to always have them on hand as a facilities management team. And I think there's a fear sort of instilled into FM teams now where if you don't disinfect all the time in a hospital, and you're going to lose a contract because someone got sick or infection rates went up. But it's asking those companies that are providing the product what the purpose of it is, and ensuring that the training for facilities management teams is correct, that they are, if this is just something that requires cleaning, it's a public hallway, or it's the reception area or something like that, that's not a medical setting. It doesn't require a medical grade disinfectant. You're talking surgeries and rooms where practice takes place, rather than a public part of a hospital where you need a medical grade disinfectant.
Okay, thank you. And we've got, I know we're at noon, but we've got one more quick question on the chat. What are the signs or indicators that a disinfectant has lost its effectiveness, even if it hasn't reached its expiration date?
Some actives will have indicators inbuilt. You'll see this in there's one particular case I'm thinking of with a powdered product that's red and then turns clear when it's no longer effective. So if it's a product that does break down, that can be one indicator. Bottles that swell is another indicator. You'll see this with bleach. As bleach breaks down, it gases. Bleach shouldn't be used any more than 6 months after manufacturing, really, because the active breaks down so rapidly. The manufacturer can do testing to prove a lifespan of a product. It tends to be more difficult than just doing normal testing because you have to artificially age a product. But if there is a concern that a product is no longer working, whether it's a colour change or the odours change, you may find that the smell becomes weaker over time. Raise that question with your manufacturer. Have they proved that at the end of a 2-year lifespan, have they got any information to show that the active substance is there in the same form? Have they done testing to show that it still kills XYZ bacteria at the end of that lifespan? It is a part of the BPR, but again, if your product has not gone through the BPR, then you may not necessarily have done that testing.
Okay. Thank you very much. We've had a request for the slides, and we'll make the just so everyone knows, a recording of this webinar available on our website, and the slides available as well. But that's all the questions. Thank you.
Well, thanks very much, Peter. That's been extremely informative, and you've been able to explain it in a very, it's a highly technical area, but certainly the explanation the layperson can clearly understand. And we do appreciate the time you put into this, and it's certainly been judging at the numbers that have joined, it's been an area that people wanted to tune in and listen, and there was some excellent questions posed there in this area as it's complicated. So thank you very much, Peter, and Kathy, thank you very much for hosting. If you want to close out, Nikki, with a word or two, that'd be excellent.
Yes, just would like to say a big thank you to Peter and to all our attendees. We hope you found this webinar interesting. It will be available, as Lorcan, our chair, stated at the start of the webinar. The white paper is available on the CHSA website, and we will be sending out copies of the recording and the slides, and also any questions that we haven't been able to answer, we will try and answer those and send those out to you. But thank you very much. And as always, from the CHSA, please, if you have any questions, please refer to the CHSA. We're here to help and guide our members, and we're looking to collaborate with other trade associations in order to move the industry and the policing and the monitoring of what's being marketed in our industry out there. But thank you very much.
Thanks.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.